Welcome back to my Colorado Tesla channel. I'm gonna do a little bit of video, a little bit standing still, a little bit driving, showing you some of the tips, tricks, things in the way I use the actual interface to the UI. It updated to version 11 not too long ago. Actually, I've gotten a couple of updates, and so it changed how I use things. And so for those of you that use it, maybe I'll show you something you didn't know. For those of you that are just interested, there's some interesting UI choices here. And because I'm a software guy, I thought I'd take a few minutes and talk about how it works. So with that, I'm going to shoot this in a couple of different takes, some driving, some standing still. So let's get started. All right, so I'm driving along here in Colorado and I want to enable autopilot. It's a pretty quiet section of this road, and this section actually works pretty good. And you'll notice over here, I'm going to enable autopilot, and I want you to watch the lower left-hand corner of this. And so a couple things happen. First of all, you get the beep, and the display changes to show the blue lines that were in autopilot. But more importantly, I got this little pop-up below the car that gave me options for lights. And that's kind of cool and interesting to me, because that was a place where actually that was a car coming towards me. It's a little bug in the autopilot. It freaked out with that car on a hill. But in any case, before there were these cards down here in this area where I could swipe left or right and I could see my tire pressure or my trips. Now those things have been moved completely, and I'll show you those later in the video. But for now, as I do something like I want to mess with lights or I engage autopilot, it gives me some options. So now if I click the high beam indicator, I'll see the same thing again. And you'll see now it's got the auto high beam in the top bar, and below that are the lights, which are set to auto. I think that's kind of a neat change, because as I enable autopilot, I want that to be able to quickly tell me, or let me make a change there of what's going on. That's one of those things that was maybe harder to do or less obvious to do if you were driving along. But now, as I want to make a change, if I touch the light stalk or I were to engage autopilot, I can quickly set the high beam things to auto change, or fog lights, or whatever it is there. The other thing is there used to be a button, there's a little Bluetooth button down here. There used to be a button down here for the wiper settings. That's no longer there, but if I tap the wiper item, I get a swing of the wipers, and then we get the same thing again, that a little display comes out at the bottom that allows me to decide where and when I want to change things. So I get to drive here for a second, but I'll come back and do some more video. All right, so I want to show you a few UI things here that are different or maybe have changed, or I think that are just kind of interesting from the perspective of someone that builds software. So here's kind of the stopped view where I have the car here, and I can open and close the trunk and that kind of thing. And then the map is what it typically is over here. And at the bottom, what we've gotten is there's a car icon, there's a temperature, there's a few icons here, and then there's another temperature and the volume on this side. Now this used to have buttons all the way across the bottom here. So there were a whole bunch of buttons. There was a wiper button, there was other things there. None of that really matters. What Tesla is trying to do is make things a little more, I think, cleaner. So these 4 buttons are in fact controllable, and they're customizable. So if I click here, there used to be a music one that would give me music, and there was an entertainment one that would give me other things, or give me the phone, calendar, theater, that kind of stuff. Now they're consolidated, and so if I cared, like maybe instead of Spotify I want streaming, I can grab this thing and I can drag it down here, and you'll notice it replaced my radio icon there. Alternatively, I can click this and delete it, and then for me the radio is something that I use often, so I put it back down there. So I like the customization. It appears, though, to be the same thing for everybody as opposed to a per user thing, which is what I would expect. Now the last thing I kind of used is here. In this case it was the cameras. But if I were to do, or the dash cam viewer rather, but if I did something like karaoke here, you'll notice this changes to karaoke. Or if I picked messages, then this changes to messages. So that's a handy thing, I think, because at least as I've used computers, what I often find is I'll do something like I'll close this, and then I'll be like, oh wait, I should have remembered that I was doing this thing, and so I open it right back up, which is kind of a handy thing to do. If I tap it, you'll notice it closes it again. And that same thing here. If I do Spotify here, the music items close down to this point, and then if I were to hit a second time, it goes away. So I like that flow of things. I don't quite have the muscle memory to go, okay, it's here, it's here, it's here. I still find myself swiping down, but that's still a good choice of how things tend to work there. Another change is I used to tap, so here, we'll try to keep the music down, but I used to come here and I'd kind of put my finger here and I'd go up and down, right? And that doesn't quite work anymore. Now I can do this.
You know, they screwed that.
Right? Or if I were to click on the side here, I can swipe slightly, but I can't control that very well. So that's a change that I find disturbing, especially while I'm driving, though. Honestly, for me, you know, this button rolls
I just don't see
the noise or the sound up and down, so maybe that's not a big deal. But one thing I did notice is that here, the temperature controls for me, I can swipe, right, if I do this, but you'll notice that it moves rather rapidly here, and as I'm driving, I find this difficult, and I find this kind of annoying. That being said, I do like that as I change temperature, I can change the seat heater very quickly or turn on the defrosters. That's a much simpler thing. Those controls used to be on the other side over here, and I'd have to remember them. But here I can just come and click on the rear defroster, say like that. If I want more controls, I can tap this, and I get the full display I used to get, though consolidating the defrosters and the steering wheel heater here is actually very convenient for me. I find that to be very valuable. The seat heaters are down here. It took me a little while to remember that they're down here, but most of this, you know, is the way it used to be, and it's fairly intuitive. I do like that they've added, if I go in here, the dog mode and camp mode here, that makes it easier for me to see those things. Now, one thing my wife and I did notice is that only one of us can do those controls at once. It's like that. This interface is single threaded. So if I'm trying to do my seat heater and she's trying to do it at the same time, and we've done that getting in the car, it doesn't work so well. But in any case, overall, I like where those things are. Now, up here, there used to be a profile button, and there was a notification if my SSD drive was actually connected and working. Those are gone. They're now hidden. But one thing I do like is the navigation that sets me whether I'm north or just the map oriented according to the direction I'm going. That used to be way on this side and it was hard to reach, and now it's right here. So if I'm navigating somewhere, like if I were to navigate to, I went out to lunch the other day, you know, and I started this navigation, and then sometimes I've reset the map or I've moved it around or done something else. The nice thing is that as things get going and as I'm driving, the button is actually up here, and I can just click this to kind of reset things, which is really nice. Now, things that I think I've noticed that I like, for example, if I was in Spotify doing something and I got a message and I went over here and then I close this, it brings back up Spotify, which is kind of nice. And I think even now, if I were to come back here and close it, it remembers that this is small and not large, which is a handy kind of UI thing that is useful. One other interesting thing, I don't know if this was there before, but you can actually click here and change this to miles. Let's see if I'm clicking, there we go, to miles as opposed to the percentage. I find that useful, especially if I'm just curious where I stand. I put the energy thing down here on the customized bar because I'm always kind of wondering where my instant or average range would be, but you have that option. The car icon now brings up a menu that is way more dense. There's more things here, and so it's become maybe the place to go check things. Now, I used to have this LT symbol and the Bluetooth things on the top bar. They're now here inside of this menu, so I have to do them. But they've given me more icons, and I think that the grouping here is a little bit better just in terms of flow and what I'm trying to do. It's a different muscle memory, but I think it's a better UI overall to have these things right away in the controls area that are common. The glove box, the light settings, the wiper settings. Certainly if I wanted to adjust something is there, and then my screen brightness is here. It used to be more scrolling here for these things, but now what they've done is made more menus. All right, I got cut off. I cut off the video accidentally. I need to change some change locations. But as I was saying, there's all these new items in here, menu items. And so I don't know if I agree with the way that they're set up, but there are some interesting things. Like controls here has the lighting here at the top, but there's a lights item, and it has the lighting here as well. And that's one of the advantages of software, is that we can change things and put them in multiple places. I wish that was there more often. Now, some of the things that don't make sense, like pedal and steering, the slip start is here, right? So this is kind of a driving thing, I guess. Maybe this is driving too, but it was odd for me in the snow that I couldn't find this. I wasn't sure where it was, and I was flipping through menus. I was assuming there was something based on driving here that wasn't there. The charging still doesn't tell me where I am in the percentage wise, which I think is a failure of UI in here for that as well. Other interesting things, what else? Trips is here now, so the odometer is down here at the bottom, and then the trips are here. I wish that was available up here somewhere as I'm driving, because sometimes you'll see, this thing is coming up in 5 miles, and in other cars I would look at the odometer and say, okay, I got to keep an eye on this to make a turn or something else. And now I don't have a good way of tracking that, so that's, I think, a bit of a fail. The service is where I found the tire pressure. Now, since I had a flat tire, this is something that I expected to check more regularly, and so I think I can never remember it's in service. I was actually just clicking around before I recorded because I wasn't sure where that was, and so I think that's one of those items that's a little bit of a hassle. My profile is up here now instead of being at the top. I do wish that was visible when this is closed, so that I knew who had last driven the car, because sometimes the seat feels a little funny, and it's not until I'm driving that I realize that somebody else was driving the car. So I wish that was up here and I was aware of what's going on. The Sentry icon isn't on here anymore, but that may be a safety security thing, so people walking by the car don't realize what's there. Another thing I thought of here is, like, I use the radio often, but I switch to music quite a bit as well. And so rather than having all those buttons here, like I have the radio, Spotify, and Bluetooth, I really don't need those. I could pick one, because I could click here and I get a drop down of all the various items. So if I were to pick Spotify here, it would change right away to that particular icon, or that particular application. So that's kind of a handy trick, that if you're looking for something different, you can just, I can switch to my phone, or I can switch to Spotify right there. And then shrink that down, or again, if that was up here, I could just shrink it down like this. Now, if I was here and I switched to streaming here, I don't have a way to shrink this down, right? Like, I'd have to go to Spotify and then click it again to shrink it down. The nice thing is that it doesn't usually change the music source for some of those items if I've switched to look at what's in Spotify. So maybe that's not a big deal either. Overall, I think they did a good job with the UI. There are a few things I would change. I would certainly repeat a few things and maybe change the naming, or even allow the user to customize the naming. I do think seeing the profile up here and the odometer would be big requests for me, because those are items that I think are very handy. And other than that, what else? Points of interest. Well, that's satellite view, but you can see here it's got some points of interest here. I can turn those off with the kind of pin thing there. The other thing is I can turn on the traffic item and the second icon, the traffic light, and that shows me what other Tesla people are reporting in terms of speeds. I find it's very distracting because there's places like this is a stop sign. If I come here, let's put it back on. It was just here. There's a stop sign right here, and that's the reason that cars slow down, but it is almost implying that that's where traffic is. By the way, the icons are gone. If I tap the screen, they come back, and then they'll appear there. But, as I said, this is a stop sign area, so cars should be slow there. It's a weird traffic item to show, so it's completely helpful for me living in suburban to rural areas, so I just turn it off. Other than that, I think that the UI is pretty clean. A few futzy things, the temperature one being a big one in terms of driver safety. The other items would be convenient ones, but Tesla's done a pretty good job, and I'm curious to see if other electric car manufacturers or even just modern car makers that put big screens in here find ways to build good UI that are safe and convenient and pleasing to use. So hopefully you've enjoyed this. Check out my other videos if you're curious what it's like owning a Tesla Model Y in Colorado.